Hi, everyone, and happy Sunday. Hope everyone is doing well. So, I am going to present some slides today just for fun. And the first thing I wanted to show you guys was recently had received an annual appeal letter, and it was really kind of cool. I wanted to show you just to kind of put things into action. So, when I get interesting or unusual appeal letters, I really look them over and kind of think when I'm going to donate or not. And if you look at this thing, there were one, two, three, four, five different pieces to it. And it has some of the things we've been talking about using colors, using visuals. It has a little story up here in the left hand document. And then it's got some pictures of some really adorable kids to go along with it. It's got some numbers for that side of your brain. And then it has a return envelope with stamps already. So it kind of creates a sense of reciprocity that, oh, maybe I really want to donate because look, they're already paying for me to do that. So it was really nice, and I am considering making a donation. So sometimes when I see these things, I just like to share that with you guys. So, okay, so this week we're pulling back the theory and the practice again and looking at those two types of knowledge. So, just a quick preamble. Epistemology, if you haven't had a philosophy class like I have, it's the study of how we know things. Now, a lot of philosophers are interested in studying things that might seem really basic, like fundamental, like how do we know that the external world exists and things like that. We're not going to do that here. We're going to look at two distinctive types of knowledge: practical, hands-on, experiential knowledge, which I think of as knowing how, and then knowing that, which is theoretical knowledge or book smarts, right? And you're going to need both for philanthropy. You're going to need to experience how to do things, which you look at the top image here, which is Simone Biles, who we might like know how she does a certain move or executes a routine, but we wouldn't be able to reproduce that or do that ourselves. Like, no way, right? So that's the knowing how that we have to have as fundraisers, and the knowing that can help us give us feedback to become better practitioners. So here's my little wheel of fundraising. And it really is the interaction of knowing how and knowing that. So experiencing and then reflecting. And oftentimes, as a fundraiser, you might start anywhere on this wheel. That's why there's no like one entry point. You might inherit, as it were, a donor that had been working with somebody else. You came to the organization, all of a sudden, you're going to work with them. So you might be getting to know the donor starting up in the top right area, and then kind of making an ask at some point, or maybe you get to know them, then you go through this cycle and make an ask later. So it is a cyclical kind of thing, and there's multiple entry points. You might whoops be starting at the preparation phase with some colleagues who can talk to you about the person you're going to be working with. You might get on board at the review stage. So there's just so many ways to get involved, but it really is a circle. And I want to point out that down below, you're consulting research, seeking behavioral insights. That's something that you can do. That's why we're going to be doing the reading that we're going to be doing this week, so that you can have even deeper handle on that piece of it, on the theoretical side of things. Okay. And then you want to incorporate everything that you've discovered. All right, so behavioral science. So what's interesting about this is going to encompass our reading for the week. So behavioral science studies what people do, not what they say. Here's an example of this. So I am trying to do a low carb diet. And then all of a sudden I came down one day this week, and my spouse had bought a bunch of M&Ms, like ostensibly for our daughter. But what did I do? Like, I took the M&M and I just ate a bunch of M&Ms for no reason, right? So I did something opposite from what I said I was going to do. Well, why? We all know that we sort of have these kinds of behaviors that don't quite articulate with what we think we're going to do. They might be driven by unconscious processes. We all know M&Ms taste good, so that's just an example of this. Now, there's a lot of other examples that don't just have to do with eating behavior or other types of unconscious behaviors. Now, if you look at this square here, this shows, it was an interesting experiment many years ago in cognitive psychology, that our brains kind of take shortcuts to make judgments. Now, if I asked you, if you looked at the parallel lines here, which line would be longer? Most people would quickly say, oh, the top line is obviously longer, even if you're not looking at the arrows on either side. right? The top line just looks longer and it's an optical illusion. If you actually drop sort of a perpendicular line down, you see that these two lines are the same length, and it's just an optical illusion. So our brains are processing so much information all the time. We need to take shortcuts. And Daniel Kahneman, his work led to a theory of behavioral economics. And also he came up with some things that led to many theories around implicit bias. So it's very important because beforehand, people would just try to predict how people might buy things or consume things based on just what they said they wanted, right? If I'm on a low carb diet, I'm going to go to the store and just buy low carb stuff and I won't consume anything else. But that's not really how people work. So some of the biases that he and others have come up with, the availability bias. So the availability bias has to do with the kind of information that we can remember and pull. So if we're a manager and we're writing a review of one of our direct reports, you might go, okay, how did they do? Oh yeah, well, they really did good. They closed this one account just last month, so they did great. Or maybe they just had a stumble recently with someone they were working with. Oh, well, they really need to work on their interpersonal skills, when really maybe the rest of the year they had done really well. So if you're a manager, you really want to document how people are doing throughout the year so that you're not falling prey to this availability bias, okay? Another interesting thing, Kahneman, I think it was, pointed out that we always think like people die in shark attacks, right? So be careful when you're in the ocean. Apparently more people die of falling airplane parts than shark attacks every year. So that's unfortunate, but we don't seem to be worried about that. So again, availability bias. Anchoring bias we've talked about earlier in the quarter, where I was asked to make a gift and a person named a much higher number than I was thinking, but I upped my gift because I had that information. I wanted to save face and all this kind of stuff. So that's another type of bias that we make when we're talking about consumer behavior. Now, I have Amazon up here for a reason. So if you look at the top left here, this little phrase bestseller, right? Which you often see when you're looking for shoes and anything on Amazon and you have no idea how to sort through the 1,000 things they give you. Well, sure, they make it easier for you. They'll put things up like discount or bestseller or whatever it may be, because that pertains to the bandwagon effect. And I often will, oh, it's bestseller. Well, other people must know, so maybe I'll get that type of shoe. But it may not relate to what's actually the best product or what's right for that particular consumer. But we make those shortcuts because, well, we don't have time to sort through a bunch of Amazon pages, right? So that's another bias. And then, of course, implicit or unconscious bias, which you've probably all heard of in terms of people with backgrounds that may differ from us. So, but whether it's based on race, gender, sexual orientation, or anything else, those are things that this whole field has pointed to as well. We make decisions that are biased toward other people, and I think the good news is that these can be unlearned. Once you're aware of them, you can make attempts to overcome the kinds of biases we have about other people that we're making without even realizing it. So that's the good news. It's not set in stone. I think being aware of all of these things can really help us as consumers, and then also as fundraising professionals. So the big takeaway: people don't act like statisticians. They're not robots, right? We act based on a lot of different things going on in our brain, conscious and unconscious. Here's some examples that relate to philanthropy. In terms of donor behavior, there's a report that says 85% of donors report very high interest in how efficient a nonprofit is, right? They want to make sure nonprofits are performing well, making good use of their donations. But how many look into actual performance data? Only 3%. So they're not really checking things out. And again, then what's driving our behavior? It might be some of those other biases. It might be availability. We just read a good report on that. It might be social desirability. Your friend comes and asks you to make a donation. So just keep that in mind, that you want to certainly present performance data. It's not that you don't, but you want to understand that these other factors that are really, it's what makes us people and not robots, right? If our friend asks us to give, if we've just read something nice about that organization, we may be inclined to do that, and that's okay. It's just something to be aware of. Now, there was an interesting study by Professor Russell James, who has done a lot of work in this area, and he reported that there was a study of organ donors, and some countries have really high rates of organ donors among their citizens, like 98, 99%. Other countries, organ donation rates maybe 10 to 15%. And so why is that? Are some people just more generous in some countries? Well, no, it was something called the status quo bias, okay? That means we kind of favor doing what we're doing already. Okay, so people, some countries on their sort of when you're getting a driver's license or wherever, they would have an opt out system for being organ donation, which meant you donate unless you went and you checked this box here to on this graphic to the right. Check here if you don't want to be an organ donor. Otherwise, you're going to be signed up. And then you kind of think, okay, I guess I'll just go with it, right? You don't want to check that you don't. But in many countries, you have to actually opt in. You have to check a box, say, yeah, I want to donate my organs. And so that may give some people pause. So status quo bias can actually sort of help if you want to sort of nudge people in the right direction in terms of something like organ donation. So then for me, an example, so some of the causes I'm really passionate about: college access for everyone, social justice. But the first donation I ever made this year was to podiatry. Why would that be? Well, I at that point was working for a podiatry association, so medical association, and we had a foundation, and I was raising money for the foundation, and I wanted to support it and show that I supported that organization. It's a good organization. It was a good cause, and that's the social desirability bias. So we all do this, and it explains some of how donors act. It explains donor behavior. And it's important, I think, to get a handle on this, to understand that just like everyone else, donors aren't going to just sort of be rational agents or sort of, as I said, robots that are just going to do things based on, well, geez, I put this great presentation about why they really ought to give and they didn't do it. It really has to do with our emotions and our decision-making processes that are happening behind the scenes, right? As humans, we need to make shortcuts. We need to think kind of quickly. And again, we're not computers that have all the time in the world to kind of compute lots of things. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? It's what makes us people. So we just have to be aware of it. We have to correct our biases if they're hurting others or if they're harmful. But in general, it's how people operate. So the research from Ideas 42 this week is going to be your reading. And then next week, we're going to talk about something completely different, which is the kinds of biases and behaviors that fundraisers may exhibit and that organizations who employ fundraisers may exhibit in terms of how much credit they attribute to their individual fundraisers coming up with gifts, and how they may put different burdens on fundraisers and have metrics that assume that fundraisers have a little more agency than we actually do. So we're going to talk about it from the fundraiser perspective. This week is from the donor perspective. So I hope you guys have a great week and enjoy your time.